On the edge of dawn, beneath a bleeding sky, a young woman named Elena, 28, stood trembling by the hospice bed of her dying father. His breath was shallow, and his gaze distant. The room was quiet, except for the irregular beep of the heart monitor. He looked at her with heavy eyes and whispered, "It was me. I took him from you." Her soul fractured. He was speaking of her younger brother, lost in a supposed accident 2 decades ago. For years she had blamed herself. No. Now, with his final breath, he handed her a truth that crushed every memory. "I made him disappear to protect myself," he murmured. Her knees buckled as her father's final exhale escaped his lips. A violent silence engulfed the room. Rage, betrayal, and unbearable grief clashed in her chest like thunder. She had come to forgive a dying man. Instead, she inherited a wound far deeper than she came with. The betrayal was not past. It was now. Outside the hospice, the world continued unbothered. Birds chirped as if no hearts had shattered. Elena stood barefoot on wet pavement, the morning dew soaking into her soles. Her coat flapped in the wind, but she felt no chill, only the cold inside. She clutched her father's ring, now a burning weight in her hand. "You took him from me," she whispered to no one. The sky above mirrored her disarray, pink and bleeding into gray. A nurse watched from a window above, but didn't speak. Elena stepped forward, face numb, breath catching. Her brother's laugh echoed in her memory, innocent and sweet. He would have been 30 this year. "Why now?" she asked the wind. The ring slipped from her fingers, clinking softly against the concrete. She didn't bend to retrieve it. She walked forward, not knowing where she was headed, only that the past had cracked open, and everything she thought she knew was a lie. Elena wandered through the city like a ghost. The streets buzzed with life, but it all passed through her like smoke. Children laughed on sidewalks. Cafe tables clinked with joy. None of it touched her. Her father's confession looped in her mind like a siren. Her body moved, but her soul hadn't followed. She found herself at the foot of an old monastery, the one she passed every day as a child but never entered. Today, something pulled her. The weathered wooden doors stood open, inviting. A gentle chime echoed from within. She stepped inside. The scent of sandalwood curled into her nostrils. Time seemed slower here. A monk, old and quiet, looked up from his sweeping eyes, kind but unblinking. He said nothing. Elena whispered, "I don't know where to put this pain." He simply nodded, as if he'd been waiting for her. As if he already knew. Inside the monastery, silence hummed louder than any city noise. Candles lined the stone walls, flickering like memories refusing to die. Elena sat cross-legged on a mat, unsure what to do, only knowing she needed to be here. The old monk slowly placed a bowl of water in front of her. "Begin here," he said. She stared at the reflection, blurred, fragmented. "I don't know how to forgive," she whispered. "I'm not sure I want to." The monk stirred the water gently, distorting her image. "Then begin with truth." Elena clenched her fists. The truth burned. Her father's voice, her brother's absence, the lies, all churning inside. But in the water's ripple something stirred. A crack of vulnerability. She didn't forgive. Not yet. But she didn't run. That too was a beginning. Night fell as Elena remained unmoving. Her tears had dried, but her heart felt raw. The monk handed her a small scroll. "You seek healing. Healing begins with remembrance." Inside was a single line written in ancient script. "To forgive is to unbury the buried." She stared at the words, feeling both empty and overfilled. The room darkened as candles flickered low. Outside, the wind had softened. She tucked the scroll into her coat and stood. The monk bowed without a word. Elena bowed back, unsure why. As she stepped into the night, a strange clarity settled over her. She wasn't healed. She wasn't whole. But she was no longer lost in silence. The road ahead was unclear, but she was walking it. Elena returned to her apartment, but it no longer felt like hers. Everything looked the same. The couch where her brother once sat with crayons, the bookshelf her father built, but nothing felt the same. She walked past the mirror in the hallway and froze. For a second, she didn't recognize herself. Her eyes, once soft, were carved hollow. She leaned in, whispering, "Who am I now?" The silence in the room answered with echoing stillness. Her phone buzzed. She let it ring. Voices outside her door, distant laughter, the hum of life. It all seemed to mock her stillness. She sank to the floor, back against the door, arms wrapped around her knees. A memory came uninvited, her brother laughing, tugging at her sleeve. "Come play, Lena." Her lips trembled. He was never coming back, and the one man who held the truth was gone. Her identity, once tethered to blame and grief, now floated, untethered in a void. Night deepened, but sleep never came. Elena sat cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by old photo albums. Dust clung to the covers, like forgotten sorrow. She flipped slowly, each picture a knife and a lullaby. Her brother's gap-toothed grin. Her mother's eyes, full of secrets even then. Her father's hand resting on her shoulder in one photo made her flinch. Was that the hand of a protector or a deceiver? She pressed her fingers against the page, trying to feel warmth where there was only cold paper. How much did they all know? She whispered. Questions multiplied like shadows in her mind. The past had always hurt, but at least it had structure. Now it lay in ruins. Yet in the ruins, she noticed something, a photo tucked inside a frame, faded and bent. Her brother and a man she didn't recognize. Her heart skipped. She had seen him before. But where? The next morning, she brought the photograph to the monastery. The old monk waited in the garden, tending to bonsai trees, with monk-like precision. "This man?" Elena asked, holding up the photo. "Who is he?" The monk looked, then silently placed his shears down. "He was a seeker once," the monk replied, "and lost himself in the illusion of protection." Elena's brow furrowed. "Was he my uncle? A guardian? A threat?" The monk replied, "He was all of these, and none. Sometimes, those meant to save us are the ones who break us first." The words sliced through her. She had come for answers, but received riddles. "He was my brother's protector," she asked. "Or his prison?" The monk touched the bark of a tree. "You will know only if you go to where the memory still breathes." He handed her a small wooden charm, carved with the symbol of wind. "The wind remembers," he said. "You must listen where it last passed." Elena traveled to the edge of the city, to a park long abandoned, overrun by wild grass and rusting swings. She remembered this place, a picnic once, her brother on the slide, their father watching closely. The image returned like lightning, her father arguing with the stranger from the photo near the edge of the woods. She had buried that memory, convinced it was a dream. The wind rushed through the trees like a voice. She followed it. Past the swings, past a broken fountain into the forest's edge. And there, an old shed, almost eaten by ivy. Her breath caught. This place had lived in nightmares. She stepped closer. The air grew heavy, and her hands trembled as she reached for the door. "What did you hide here?" she whispered to the wind. The charm in her pocket warmed. The shed door creaked open with a sound that scraped her bones. Inside, dust and silence reigned. Boxes, broken toys, and a single child's shoe lay beneath layers of time. Elena stepped carefully, each footfall stirring ghosts. Her fingers trailed across a dusty wall where her brother's name was once etched with chalk, barely visible now. "He was here," she whispered. Then, something under a loose floorboard caught her eye. She pried it open. Inside, drawings, her brother's, unmistakable. One showed the stranger protecting him from someone faceless. Another, her father's silhouette looming large. A sob escaped her. These weren't memories. They were proof. Her brother had been hidden, maybe even saved, but at what cost? The truth didn't soothe her. It shattered her in new ways. Yet for the first time, she wasn't lost in the dark. She was walking toward it, torch in hand. Elena sat on a bench near the shed. The child's drawings spread across her lap like ancient scriptures. Each line etched a pain she never saw. Her brother had feared their father. The man she mourned. The man she hated. The man she thought she knew. Her breath turned ragged. "Was I blind?" she whispered. But it wasn't blindness. It was survival. Children mold truth to fit love. A soft crunch behind her made her turn. A stranger stood silently on the path. He looked older now, but she knew that face. The man from the photo. The protector. The ghost. He didn't move. Neither did she. "You knew him," she said, her voice cracking. He nodded. "I tried to protect him. You failed," she shot back. Silence. The man lowered his eyes. Yes. No defense. No excuses. Just the truth. And suddenly, Elena's rage had nowhere to go. It clashed with sorrow, confusion, and a strange, quiet understanding. They sat together beneath the bare branches of a maple tree, silence folding around them like mist. Elena held a drawing up. "He drew you," she said. The man, Jonas, looked away. "He called me his storm shield," he murmured. "He trusted you," she whispered. Jonas's jaw clenched. "I couldn't protect him forever. Your father, he made me leave. Threatened everything." Elena's hand tightened. "And you did nothing?" Jonas flinched. "I did what I thought was best then. I walked away thinking it would keep him safe. And he vanished," she said, voice bitter. "Because of my silence," Jonas replied, his voice raw. A breeze passed between them. Pain hung suspended like frozen breath. There was no redemption here, only shared ruin. But in that ruin, something shifted. Elena no longer stood alone in her grief. Someone else carried it too, even if they had once dropped it. Back at the monastery, Elena returned with heavy steps. The monk awaited her by a stone lantern, candlelight glowing in the dusk. "You met the storm," he said gently. "Yes," she replied, but there was no I in it, just wreckage. The monk offered her a bowl of rice and motioned for her to sit. "Even wreckage can feed wisdom," he said. "Are you saying I should forgive him?" Elena asked, voice sharp. "No," the monk replied. "I am saying, see him fully." She stared at the bowl, untouched. "He broke my family. I can't forgive that." The monk took a grain of rice and pressed it to the stone. "Neither can the stone, but it holds the seed." Elena sat in silence. She wasn't ready to let go, but she was ready to look. And that, the monk told her, was enough for today. Later that night, Elena wandered into the inner shrine. A single bell hung above the altar, unmoved by wind. She lit a stick of incense, hands shaking. "Are you somewhere, Theo?" she whispered. Her brother's name felt foreign in her mouth. She hadn't spoken it in years. The incense smoke curled upward like memories rising from dust. She pictured him hiding behind curtains, laughing at his own mischief. Her chest ached. "I thought I failed you," she said softly. "But maybe it wasn't me." Tears welled up. "I wanted to find you, and instead I found pieces." She knelt before the altar, head bowed low. "Tell me what to do with them." A wind passed through the shrine, gently ringing the bell. No answer, no miracle, just presence. And for once, that was enough. Her grief didn't vanish, but it bowed beside her. At sunrise, Elena stood at the cliff's edge behind the monastery. The world below bathed in gold, birds riding invisible currents. She carried her brother's final drawing in one hand, the monk's charm in the other. Closing her eyes, she breathed deeply. "I don't know if you're out there," she said, "but I'm still walking." She folded the drawing carefully and placed it on a stone, weighed down by the charm. It was no grand ceremony, no thunder, just breath, just letting go of the need to fix it all. As the sun rose, she let the light wash her face. Somewhere behind her, the monk watched quietly, hands clasped. Elena didn't turn around. She didn't need to. In her stillness, there was motion. In her surrender, the beginning of release. A week passed. The silence around Elena thickened, not empty, but pregnant with revelation. She returned to the shed one final time. Something urged her deeper, past the boxes she had already uncovered. Behind a wooden panel, she found a locked tin box. It was old, rusted. She pried it open with shaking hands. Inside, cassette tapes, labeled only by year: 2006, 2007, 2008. She stared. One was labeled Theo, Confession. She felt the world still around her. She ran back to her apartment, heart hammering. Dusting off an old tape recorder, she inserted the cassette and pressed play. Static crackled. Then a voice, young, unsure, trembling. "My name is Theo. If you're hearing this, then I never made it back." Elena covered her mouth. "I wanted to stay with Jonas. He kept me safe. But Dad said he'd hurt him if I didn't come home. I didn't want anyone to get hurt." Her knees buckled. She had begged for the truth. It had been waiting all along. Theo's voice echoed in the small room. "I thought if I obeyed, everyone would be safe. But Dad isn't who you think he is, Lena. He smiles when people are watching. But alone, he's cold. I miss you." Elena fell to her knees. Each word chipped away at her carefully constructed grief. She'd spent years blaming herself for his disappearance. But it wasn't her fault. It never was. "I love you, Lena. I hope you remember me laughing, not scared." The tape clicked off. A silence louder than screams filled the room. She wept, not just for Theo, but for the little girl who'd carried guilt like a second spine. She crawled to the mirror again. This time, she didn't look away. "You're not broken," she whispered to her reflection. "You were lied to." It was the first time the truth didn't crush her. It cradled her instead. She returned to the monastery, not for answers, but to lay something down. The monk waited by a tree shedding its leaves, as if nature itself were grieving beside her. Elena handed him the cassette. "This is what was hidden." The monk accepted it without question. "Truth must not always be spoken aloud," he said, "but it must always be known." Elena looked up at the sky. Clouds rolled gently overhead, neither light nor dark. "How do I live with this?" she asked. The monk touched her chest gently. "By letting it live through you." She closed her eyes. The pain was still there, but it no longer drowned her. It flowed, like a river through a cracked mountain, reshaping her from within. "You carry your brother," the monk whispered. "But now, let him walk beside you." She nodded. And for the first time in her adult life, she felt space inside her chest. At night, Elena lit a candle at her apartment window. She sat cross-legged, holding her brother's last drawing, the one he never got to finish. A sun in the corner, a girl and boy holding hands. But the girl's face had no eyes. She realized now it was incomplete because he never got to finish seeing her. She picked up a pencil. Her hands trembled. Gently, she drew eyes. Not perfect, but clear. She stared at it and felt her brother with her. Not just as memory, but presence. "I see you now," she said. "And I think you see me too." She placed the drawing beside the candle. Its light flickered, as if in response. The silence in the room felt like acknowledgement. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had shape now. It had voice. And most of all, it had meaning. The next morning, Elena visited Theo's resting place, a quiet grove near the outskirts of town, where the monastery monks had helped her place a small stone marker. It had no date, no epitaph, just his name and a single carved symbol: wind. She knelt and pressed her forehead to the earth. I know you were scared. I know you were brave. She laid the finished drawing against the stone. The wind picked up softly, lifting her hair. Leaves rustled, and the world felt briefly suspended. I forgive myself, she said, for not knowing, for surviving. She stood tall, spine straight. A new weight sat in her chest, not heavy, but anchored. She didn't know what came next. But for the first time, the future didn't feel like a shadow. It felt like a sunrise waiting behind the hills. And this time, she was ready to walk toward it. Elena returned once more to her childhood home. It had been sold years ago, but the structure remained, a ghost with locked doors and boarded windows. She stood at the fence, staring at the place where her world was first shaped. Memories crawled through her. Her father's loud footsteps, the way silence used to signal danger, the kitchen corner where she and Theo whispered secrets. She placed her hand on the rusted gate. I came back to bury something, she murmured. In her pocket was the tape. She didn't want to keep it. Didn't want it destroyed either. She slipped it through a crack in the porch floorboards. A quiet burial. You don't own me anymore, she whispered, not to the house, but to the fear. The gate creaked as she walked away. For the first time her back was to it, and her shoulders didn't hunch. That night, Elena sat in the monastery's meditation hall, surrounded by quiet. The monk lit a single lantern and placed it before her. Light is not the absence of pain, he said, but the presence of awareness. Elena closed her eyes. Her breath slowed, but inside, her heart raced. She wasn't sure what she was asking for anymore. Peace? Release? Forgiveness? Or simply rest? As she inhaled, old voices rose. Theo laughing. Her father shouting. Her mother crying behind closed doors. She exhaled and let them pass. Not erased, but honored, then let go. This pain made me, she whispered in her mind. But it won't define me. She sat longer than she ever had before. No epiphany. No glow. Just breath. And for the first time, it was enough. In the early morning, Elena met Jonas again. They walked without speaking through the woods, feet crunching fallen leaves. He stopped near the riverbank. I dream of him, Jonas said. He always forgives me. And I wake up, not believing it. Elena watched the water move. Maybe he doesn't need us to forgive ourselves for him. Maybe it's for us. Jonas nodded, tears in his eyes. I never stopped loving him. I know, she said softly. They sat by the bank. For a while, they simply watched the river. No longer haunted, just present. The current did not demand forgiveness. It flowed, indifferent but beautiful. He would like this, Jonas said. Elena smiled faintly. He still does. In that moment, the guilt they shared didn't vanish, but it finally loosened its grip. That afternoon, the monk handed Elena a thin journal. From him, he said. Inside, the pages were blank. She looked at him, puzzled. A blank journal? The monk smiled. For the story yet to be written. She ran her fingers over the pages. But once, her life had felt written in stone. Now, it felt like fresh clay. I don't know who I am without the pain, she confessed. Then begin there, the monk replied. Name what remains. That night, she sat under the stars, pen in hand. She wrote not about Theo or her father, but about herself, her anger, her love, her loneliness, her voice. She wrote until her fingers ached. And on the last page she wrote, I am still becoming. It wasn't a conclusion. It was a door. Days later, Elena prepared to leave the monastery. Her bags were light. She walked slowly through the stone corridors, bowing to the monk at the gate. Where will you go? He asked. She smiled. Where I can breathe. He nodded. Then you've already arrived. As she stepped onto the winding path, the mountains rose ahead, vast and unfamiliar. She didn't fear them. She felt her brother in the wind, her mother in the sun, and even her father, somewhere deep in the shadows, now powerless. Each step was a quiet defiance, a promise to live forward. At the mountain bend, she paused, looking back one last time. "Thank you," she whispered, not to anyone in particular, just to the moment, just to the healing. And then she turned and walked on. Elena found herself in a quiet coastal town days later. The sea was not where her story began, but it offered something her past never had: openness. She rented a small room above a bookshop where the windows faced the waves. Each morning, she sat with a cup of tea and let the wind touch her face. She didn't need to meditate or pray. She just listened. Seagulls cried overhead, and the ocean hummed a rhythm that matched her breath. One morning, she opened her journal and wrote a single line: "Not all storms come to destroy. Some come to clear the way." She closed the book, not with finality, but respect. Forgiveness hadn't struck her like lightning. It had unfolded like tide on stone, slow, persistent, and shaping. She didn't know if she forgave her father, but she no longer needed revenge. And that, perhaps, was its own peace. Later that week, Elena volunteered at the town's small school. The children reminded her of Thea, not because they looked like him, but because they felt like him. Curious, unfiltered, alive, white. One boy reminded her especially of the way Theo used to squint when drawing. He handed her a picture: 2 birds in a tree. "They're brothers," he said, "but they don't talk anymore." She smiled softly. "Maybe they will, someday." He shrugged. "Or maybe they sing when we're not listening." Elena folded the paper carefully and kept it in her coat pocket. That evening, she sat by the sea again, holding the drawing. Tears welled up, not from grief, but gratitude. Theo wasn't coming back, but he wasn't gone either. In laughter, in lines on paper, in the ache that now hummed gently, not sharply, in her, he lived. That night, Elena dreamed of Theo. He stood in the field they used to play in, barefoot, holding a string tied to nothing. "Where's the kite?" she asked in the dream. He smiled. "It's flying, you just can't see it." She reached out, but he stepped back. "You don't have to hold on anymore," he said. "Let it fly." When she awoke, tears soaked her pillow. But they didn't sting. They were soft, like dew on morning grass. She stepped outside barefoot and looked up at the sky. It was blank, cloudless, wide. A kite could fly there, or nothing could, and that was fine too. She whispered into the breeze, "I see you." And for the first time, she didn't feel like she was searching anymore, just walking. And that, she finally understood, was the whole point. Back in town, Elena walked the market street. Faces blurred past her, but she wasn't lost among them. She stopped at a flower stall, brushing her fingers across a marigold. "You look lighter," the vendor said. Elena smiled. "I've been carrying too much for too long." She bought a single bloom and tucked it behind her ear. No occasion, just living. As she moved through the crowd, she noticed her posture, shoulders open, not drawn in. She was inhabiting space again, not shrinking. She entered the bookstore, greeted by the scent of old pages. She smiled at the owner. "I think I'm ready," she said. "To teach." The owner nodded. "Your voice is needed." Her voice. Not Theo's. Not her father's. Hers. It didn't rise loud. It simply existed. And that was more than enough. Elena sat by the sea that evening, watching the tide kiss the sand and retreat again. A girl passed by, spinning in circles with arms outstretched, laughing. The sound echoed through the salty air. Elena closed her eyes. In that laughter, she felt Theo. In the tide, she felt herself. She didn't need signs anymore. Just presence. She took a deep breath and smiled, not the forced kind she'd learned as armor, but something gentler, honest. She rose, barefoot again, and walked toward the water's edge. Not to be cleansed, not to perform a ritual, but to feel the world on her skin. The sand. The salt. The wind. This was her rebirth. Not loud. Not marked by ceremony. Just being. Fully. And for once, that was everything. Elena sat in the town's small library, surrounded by children as she read aloud. The story wasn't dramatic, just a tale about a tree that grew toward the light, even when shadowed. As she turned the final page, she saw the children's eyes, quiet, curious, open. One little girl raised her hand. Why did the tree keep growing if no one saw it? Elena smiled gently. Because growing is what trees do, even when no one claps for them. After the reading, the children left one by one, their laughter trailing behind. Alone now, Elena sat in the quiet room. She looked down at the book in her lap, her own hand steady on the cover. She wasn't the girl in the hospice anymore. Not the sister lost in blame. She was the woman still learning how to grow. Not for the world's applause, but for her own breath. Later, she walked along the beach with Jonas. They spoke little. There wasn't much left to say. He paused, skipping a stone into the waves. I still carry guilt, he admitted. Some days it's lighter, some days it's a storm. Elena nodded. Me too, but we don't have to fight the storm, just stand in it without drowning. Jonas turned to her. You've changed. She smiled faintly. No, I just stopped hiding. The horizon burned orange as the sun descended. They watched in silence, not trying to name what they felt. That was the lesson. Not every truth needed a word. Some simply needed witnessing. They parted without drama, just a nod, a shared look. The past remained. But so did they. Not broken, just open. That evening, Elena returned to the shrine she had built. Small, simple stones gathered in a circle near her cottage garden. She placed a fresh marigold at the center. Hi, Theo, she said. I'm doing okay. The breeze rustled the leaves, and a bird called out in the trees. She sat beside the stones, arms wrapped around her knees. I still miss you, she whispered, but it doesn't hurt in the same way anymore. She rested her head on her knees, letting silence cradle her. Thank you for finding your way back to me. The sun dipped behind the hills, casting the shrine in long shadows. She didn't cry this time. The ache remained, but it was no longer hollow. It was full of memory, full of love, and full of all the versions of her that had led her here. Before bed, Elena stood by the window, candle in hand. The sea whispered in the distance. The night wasn't empty, it was vast. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet blessing, not from scripture, not from ritual, but from her. May the broken be seen. May the unseen be held. May what was buried bloom. She placed the candle by the window. Its flame flickered once, then steadied. She didn't need visions or dreams. Just this stillness, this life. She touched the journal beside her bed and smiled. Not every page was filled. It didn't need to be. The pages still waiting didn't frighten her anymore. They called to her. I'm not finished, she whispered. Not a plea, a vow. Morning broke without ceremony. The sea shimmered. The world spun. And Elena simply lived. She poured tea, washed dishes, opened her windows to the sun. The pain hadn't left her. It never would. But it no longer dictated the rhythm of her days. Forgiveness didn't erase the past. It reshaped the present. She walked barefoot through her garden, fingers grazing rosemary and thyme. The earth didn't ask for apologies. It just received. She paused under the tree she had planted weeks ago. It hadn't grown much, but it had rooted. That was enough. She looked up toward the sky and whispered, not loudly, not in need, but with clarity. I forgive you. And for the first time, it wasn't to her father. It was to herself.